Hello and welcome to this recording about security and environments. Actually, covers a bit more than security in this. It's around strategy of environments as well as access. So there are multiple layers to the security. We've looked at tenant access and isolation. We're now going to go one step further into the environment access itself. And what strategy do you have for environment? So it needs a bit of foresight and thinking around this. So let's have a talk about it. So each app, each flow runs in an environment. Each environment is a collection of AI builder models. It can or cannot have a Dataverse database in it, a collection of flows, of apps, of bots, chatbots. So each environment is a collection of these objects, and these objects run inside the environments. And you can centrally manage these environments in the admin center, and you can control access to these through the admin center as well. So it's a container in which end users with maker permissions can create and share resources and data. Admins can manage those resources and administer those users' permissions. An environment is tied to one geographic location. There are 7 types of environment. Every tenant has a default environment. And in terms of and in that default environment, everyone has maker rights. It's a very important concept. Everyone has maker rights in the default environment, so you need a special strategy for the default environment. Some security tips just straight off the bat. Non-default environments offer more permission control, so where we always recommend creating solutions creating any sort of solution inside its own inside an environment. It could be dedicated, it could be part of dev test prod, but it not in the default environment. Non-default environment creation can be restricted to specific admins. Non-default and non-developer environments with a Dataverse can restrict access to a specific security group. So those environments there are environments that have Dataverse and environments that don't. Those that have Dataverse, you can have specific security on them because they have the Dataverse database. And there's some screenshots there on the right hand side about these things. These are the types of environments. Now this link here will take you to the Microsoft site that will go through the different types of environments. So I highly recommend you check that out because the different types of environments might change over time. So again, that warning of do your own research applies here just as much as everywhere else. So you have the default environment that is auto-created. Every single tenant has a default environment. It has Dataverse mandatory, and it is used for integrations with inbuilt Office 365 services, and it can be used, although not all the time. I wouldn't highly recommend it, but it can be used as shared environment for small use cases. If you've got one bot that's doing one specific thing, one specific small task, it's probably better to keep that in default environment. But there's a certain point that you get to pretty quickly where you want to move that into its own or into a different environment, not the default environment. So all users in the default have environment maker. You then have a production type of environment, which is subject to tenant level settings. The creator is a licensed user. They need to have a Power Apps license, and it's for the permanent work. It's production environment, and you should use these for work on which you or your organization depends. You then have sandbox. These are good for development and testing, separate from production. You then have trial environments. These are intended to support short-term testing, automatically cleaned up after 30 days. They're gone after 30 days. So you can set up you can restrict access on your whole domain on your whole tenant so that people can only create trial environments. You then have a developer license. Developer license used to be called the community plan, now it's called the developer plan. They're special environments intended for use by the owner, and they can't be shared. Nothing in there can be shared with other users. So this really is a playground for a person. So consider it like what you might do is you might start creating in a developer environment, and then you might play around with that. That's a persistent single person access to play around with and do stuff. You then might want to move that into a trial environment to try it out with some of your team. Then maybe it goes into a sandbox environment as a more permanent development playground. But you see these sorts of options you've got for developing a strategy. For production environments, you might have dev, test, and prod. You might have dedicated environment for specific applications. There's lots of options to think about. You've then got Dataverse for Teams. This is another auto-created mandatory Dataverse. It is created for a team in Teams. When any team creates an app in Teams, Dataverse for Teams is going to get provisioned. Or if you install a Power Apps from the app catalog, it's going to get provisioned. Dataverse for Teams, it's a special environment that has a slimmed down version of Dataverse that allows Dataverse access and app creation, bot creation within Microsoft Teams. And finally, there is a support environment which is created in your tenant by Microsoft for detection and support. So only when you request that can you actually create that. So the default environment, it's not for development of critical apps. Everyone in the tenant can create apps and flows in there. There's no way to block the assignment of environment maker or to remove it. It can't be disabled or deleted because it hosts really core stuff like SharePoint project. It hosts some really core stuff in there, so it can't be deleted or disabled. Some security tips. One thing that Microsoft recommends is renaming the environment to personal productivity, and then configuring data loss on that so the connectors can only be used for specific things around personal productivity. So one strategy may be that you would implement DLP across all the non-business connectors, but leave things like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook available so that people can write their own flows for personal productivity. So you're naming the environment personal productivity. Here's a checklist for creating secure environments. There's a checklist here which is good to go to and review. Always click the links. Don't rely on this as most up to date. But this is the what you could do. So here you've got some, and this is an environment strategy for a pretend organization. So you have the default, everyone is a maker. This is the personal productivity environment. You then have developer environments where only one user has access to that. Then you have these shared environments where there's a critical project that it's super important application. It's got its own dev, test, and prod. You then have this is a critical system. This might be the CRM or whatever it is. It's a highly critical system. You've then got these other other apps, a shared test and a shared production. And there might be a business unit here developing stuff. There might be an important project over here that's developing stuff, and they will eventually get migrated into the shared test and then into the shared prod. So different strategies for different types of organizations. So how to set up these environments: you assign admins the Power Platform Service admin role in Azure AD, restrict the creation of new trial and production environments just to admins, treat the default environment as personal productivity and lock it down with DLP, establish a process for requesting access for creation of environments. You could do this using Microsoft Forms. It's really easy to do. Just establish a process, even an IT help desk ticket. If people want to create environments, then they log a ticket to do that. And then in terms of creating other apps, other environments, dev, test, prod for specific business groups or applications. And you might have individual use environments for training and for proof of concepts, that kind of thing. You could set those up as specific individual use environments. And then establish tenant and environment data level DLP policies. Make sure you've thought about those, and there's a module on that coming up. So it's this tiered approach to team and employee productivity environments, because you want to allow people to play around and play with their own solutions, but then you want to make sure that you've also got some certain control over the production releases of stuff. So you have default environment, restrictive DLP policy, power user environment. So this might be a shared environment. Admins control the maker list, and this would be less restrictive. You might have, let's use an example of a law firm. You might have a custom connector that you've built that has access to client and metadata with certain actions and certain exposes certain data that you think would be cool for power users to work with. Well, you could create a power user environment, shared environment, give access to people that can work with that data in their custom solutions, in their playground solutions. Then you might have a powered developer environment, shared environment with more complex scenarios, again, a less restrictive DLP policy. In this one, you want to give access to for people to create connectors, to edit connectors, all of that kind of stuff. And then training environments for training scenarios as well, or where things you might even connect to. The connectors might connect to test data or dummy data, so having training environments as well. So you'd have team and employee productivity environments, one class of environments, and another class of environments is custom environments for dedicated environments for projects and workloads, shared test and prod for important but medium complex apps, and work with the business units to create and build this strategy together. This is another way of thinking about it. Have defined tiers of application support. So critical applications get their own environments, they get their own team potentially working on them, they get their own release management process, super robust application lifecycle management, a longer development cycle. You might have 3 months to get to an MVP, and you might even have a release cycle of once every 3 months, something like that. Then you have important but not critical or medium complexity or scope to a business unit. So you have these important apps that are important to parts of the business, or important but not super critical to the whole of the business. And then the support might be owned by the app owner but helped by IT. ALM might be, you might have application lifecycle management, you might have DevOps in here, or you might just use export and import, and we'll talk about that later in this course. But typically development is less than 3 months, so it's important, but it's not super critical. And then at the lower tier, you've got this productivity that doesn't need a high level of governance. It is where you would have an app developer creating a point solution for their particular team. So maybe it's something they wrote, a little automation that does something in Power Automate Desktop, where they can press a button and it imports data from a spreadsheet into a web page using points and clicks, and they've shared that with their team and they all love it and it's just great, but it's not mission critical. If that fell over, then work can still happen. So it doesn't need that high level of governance, but you still want visibility on it, and that's where Centre of Excellence comes in, that we'll talk about later on. So there's a lot to think about in terms of environment setup, and environment strategy. If you are going down that path of thinking about putting in place a robust strategy for Power Platform, really have a strategy and then clearly communicate that strategy to the makers in the organization. So what is the purpose of the default shared productivity environment, and where can people go to get the training for that? What is the purpose of trial and developer environments, and where do you go for training for that? How do you request that? How do you get custom environments set up? If you do get a custom environment set up, what is the responsibilities of that role? What do they need to do? What is their level of trust that is being put on them? Because it is a contract. I've just seen the Spider-Man movie, so with great responsibility, with great power there must be responsibility, something like that. So there's responsibilities there, and are they clearly communicated? So have that strategy, document it, put it on a wiki, put it on a SharePoint page, make sure that it's communicated, and make sure people sign up to it when they're doing the work. So in terms of access control, there's 3 levels of access control, and it depends on whether it has a Dataverse or not a Dataverse. Most environments will have a Dataverse. Most environments will have a Dataverse. An environment without a Dataverse has 3 levels. You have environment roles, which is a maker admin, environment maker, environment admin role, and then you have resource permissions on the apps, the flows, and the connectors themselves. So that's without a CVS, you've got those permissions. Once a CDS has been created, the once Dataverse database has been created, the Dataverse security roles take over for controlling security. So you have resource permissions on the resource themselves, and then you have environment and Dataverse roles. So environment maker, environment admin, system customizer, to give access to the common data service data. So there's some layers there as well. Within the access, so if you go into the environment, the Power Platform Admin Center, go into environments, go into settings, go into users, you'll see a list of users who've got a list of users. The list of users seems to populate depending on certain factors that I'm unaware of at this point in time. Sometimes they've got access, sometimes they haven't. So what is good is there's this Run Diagnostics button where you can click and it will give you the results of what that person can see and do in the environment. Super useful for troubleshooting individual people and individual access to apps and things like that. So yes, when Dataverse is in an environment, there's certain things around security. So users associated with environment either directly or just in time via an Azure AD group. So you can set up access to a group, and then once the person is in that group, they get access to that environment. Access to apps, data, and services by association with one or more security roles. So to get access to the data underneath an app in Dataverse, users need to have a Dataverse role assigned to them. Now, you can do this in a number of ways, and there's documentation out there to review on it. But you need to have a role that gives them access. If you've got a solution that has custom tables in it, you need to create a role, a Dataverse role that has access to those particular tables, and then put the app users in those roles. Just sharing the app from the app maker interface is not enough if it has Dataverse custom tables that they need access to. If they don't need access to it, then to the actual tables, that's totally fine. But you do need to think about that when Dataverse is involved. Because, that's the reason why all of that is important, is because Dataverse data can be secured right down to the field level. So you can say, this row is visible and this column is visible. So you can have row level security, you can have column level security, and of course where row level and column level meet is the field, and you can have field level security. So that's why you need to grant these roles. And the roles that are available are things like being able to see their own data or all data, that kind of thing. So these are the key out-of-the-box security roles that you need to know. You have environment admin. So these environment admin speak for itself. Environment maker, these people can create things, apps, connections, flows, custom APIs, gateways. These people can make stuff in the environment. Common data service user, this has actually been renamed to basic user. I am going to rename that on the fly here. Oops. Sorry. Current slide. So this is now being renamed to basic user. So this is an important role because this has resource executions. They can execute things, and they can add and update and view and all of that stuff for Dataverse records that they own for standard entities, right? So for standard, not custom entities. So if you create an app, you've got a couple of options. If you've got an app with custom tables, that you want everyone in the app to see that custom table and all the data in that custom table, then you need to work out what you're doing with that basic user role. You could change the basic user role to encompass that app and its data. That's option one. You could do that. If it's a dedicated environment, that would work pretty well. Or you could create a custom role. There is actually a template available online where you can import that template into the security manager. I forget the name of the admin part, but in the security settings, you can import, and that has all of the settings of a basic user, and then you can add the additional ones. So you've got a separate role from basic user. You can have a tailored user as well. So you need to think about that with Dataverse solutions. Then you've got system administrators. System admins can customize, administer the environment. Security roles, they can share things, they can administer the security roles, and they can view all data in the environment, which is important as well. System customizer role, this allows you to view records for environment entities that they create. So anyone that people in System Customizer can create entities, and they can view the records for those entities that they create as well. So often a developer that is building solutions inside a Dataverse environment would need Environment Maker and System Customizer to be able to do that work. So yeah, this is just reinforcing that custom entity's privilege must be explicitly granted in security before your app can be used. You can add them to an existing security role like basic user, or you can create a custom security role. You can use security groups to control access. If you do not specify a security group, all users that have a Dataverse license will be added to the environment. When a security group is associated with the existing environment with users, all users in the environment that are not members of the group will be disabled. So they'll still show up in the users section, but they'll be disabled. Pretty big topic, environments. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you in the next video.